about 5 years ago. And in that book, what we did was we took the mission statement of Kirkridge, which is Kirkridge is a place to be and to become a people of hope, compassion, justice, and service. So the first one of this series I did with Sally, and it was on to be and become. And this one is on the word hope. So I am delighted also to have my dear friend Veta Goler join me in this. And as we gather, I'm going to invite us all, if we want, to take your shoes off or take a deep breath. And just for a moment, kind of let's breathe in together and into this space. With deep gratitude that we have an opportunity to be here and together. With deep gratitude that we're welcoming old and new friends. And deep gratitude that just for a moment we can let go of all the other things that call us today and just be here. So imagine, it's a beautiful spring day here up on the mountain. So imagine for a moment, we're just sitting around. We're just sitting around in chairs around one of the trees overlooking the mountain. Maybe we're sipping coffee, having some lunch, and enjoying each other. It's one of the things during the pandemic that's been so hard that we're just not together. But yet we have found an amazing way to be together on screen. So the hope for this series was to look back and also to look forward. So I've been here for 17 years, and I think the hope was that I could look back and sort of get the roots so that we could remember those as we look forward. And Sally Harris taught us about the Sankofa bird, which is how it holds a seed in its mouth, looking backwards, but also moving forward. And I think that's what we're trying to do. It is based on the mission statement to be and become a people of hope, compassion, justice, and service. One of the things we've accomplished over the last 3 years, I forget, Justine, what the statistics that you threw out this morning about the number of online programs that we've had, is that we were able to pivot from being in place, which we always thought about Kirkridge as a place to come to now it's a place to be together wherever we gather. And so we've done a large number of programs online. And the reason that we could do that is that we had a group of faculty, about 60 people, who donated their time and their energy to present these programs for the whole of the Kirkridge community. And that faculty really, I think, creates Kirkridge as a very unique place to be. So I am so grateful. Now, Sally, you're going to have to help me with this word. We just had a faculty meeting last night, and we have divided, in order to share all the work, we've divided the faculty into, people are having trouble with this word, departments. So it's not going to be departments. We're thinking of it more like overlays, like those old, and many of you won't know these, overhead projectors where you put these transparencies on, sort of like that. But Sally, what was the word that was used? Can you remind me?
You actually should ask Veta, because it's her fault, because she gave us the metaphor of mosaic. And in a mosaic, tessellation means what the colors and the light that hold the pieces together. So we were playing with calling our department chairs tessellators.
Okay, tessellators. So now you know how the Tesla car got its name.
How do you spell that, please?
Tessellator. I guess it's TELSALATEROR.
TESS. TESS.
Oh.
Thank you. Yeah,
Okay,
and we're
thank you.
not there yet, but we're playing with words. So we welcome you to give us your words too. But clearly, department chair is an old paradigm.
Okay. So we have 4 tesselators. All right. And Vita is the tessellator of hope. And I just want to introduce her. So Dr. Veta Goler is recently retired from her position as associate professor and chair of dance performance and choreography, and the co-director of the Teaching Resource and Research Center at Spelman College. So Vita, I've forgotten how many years you were there. 30,
33.
33, I guessed 34.
Yep, very close. Yep.
Very close. So, and she does a lot of research. She's done a lot of research in the intersection of dance and spirituality and popular culture, and spirituality and contemplative practice. She meditates. She's a longtime retreat leader, and she's very committed to helping others enrich their lives and incorporate meditation and other contemplative practices. We share being Circle of Trust facilitators, and presently Vita's chairing the board of the Center for Courage and Renewal, which is a national center that works and creates various types of courage programs based on the work of Parker Palmer. It's an international program that she does. She's also a certified purpose guide, helping people to discover their inner purpose. She's a Kirkridge Courage Fellow, a member of our faculty, and a dear friend and a colleague. So Vita, I am so grateful to have you here today with me and saying yes to being the tessellator of hope. So how we're going to go forward is I'm going to talk a little bit about this going back and going forward, and why it is that we thought it was really critical to put the word hope in our mission statement. And then Vita's going to talk about some of what she envisions, and then together we'll just have conversation. We're small, so we'll just have some conversation. So I'm going to first pass about speaking. So last week I was painting some walls, and often what I do when I paint, it's really actually maybe to one of my meditation practices. When I was painting some walls, I was listening to the Lenten reflections coming out of Riverside Church in New York City. And I came across one from Amy Lundy Whitler entitled Act of Hope. And it is a powerful little meditation. And I have to acknowledge that her podcast really engaged me, and it helped me frame today's Gathered at the Table. And as we begin, I want to use the same question she asked on her podcast to each of you. And I'd like you to put your answer in the chat box. So the see in the bottom in the middle, there's a place called chat. And if you click on that, it'll say everyone, and you can just put your answer there. So here's the question. When I consider the condition of our world, I think things are getting blank, blank, blank. When I consider the condition of our world, I think things are getting. Okay. Oh, these are great. Let me read some of these. Oh my goodness, Vita, you're so much happier than me. Okay. Better, even though it looks like they. Vita, did you want to finish that?
inadvertently hit the return button, even though it looks like they're getting worse. It's just
Getting worse. Okay.
holding on. Yeah.
Stan says they're getting worse. Chloe says brought into the light. Abigail says bad, worse. Hey, Sheena, transformed into something beautiful, revealed, much worse than ever before during my lifetime. I said more divided, self-focused, and dangerous. Are getting in Vita finished, it's getting old energy. It's just the old energy holding on and refusing to let go. Broken to hopefully be mended, is in our hands, revealed and renewed, unevenly advancing, unraveled. Okay. I'm really glad to be with you guys because we have some people in this group that are hopeful. And that's what it is. You know, what does it mean when we read these answers and ask ourselves, what does it mean to be a people of hope in today's world, in light of what's happening with the earth, what's happening with racial injustice, what's happening with poverty, what's happening with immigrants, what's happening with violence, what's happening with guns, what's happening with the division in neighborhoods. What does it mean? What does it mean to be a people of hope? One of the things that this podcast reminded me of, and you remind me of, is that fear and struggle is not unique to any particular time in our world. And we as people of faith traditions, or perhaps no faith traditions, have wrestled deeply with the questions of hope, doubt, fear, faith, and how it is we start to put that mosaic together in our lives. The fact is we live in a messy world. We live in a really difficult world. We live in a world of division, and we live in a world that that sometimes the answers are not clear about how it is we're called to go forward. But what hope does is it says we're not going to just tread those waters. We're not in some type of, what Amy said, sea of impossibility. But the question is, what does hope call us to? What does hope call us to when the world feels so frightening? So now I'm going to go back into a little history. So George MacLeod was the founder of the Iona community in the he started in the mid 30s into 1939 is actually when he found what they called the Iona community. The Iona community inspired Kirkridge. So we're based on the same roots of that particular community. But what I want to raise up for you is that George MacLeod was an officer in the Royal Navy in Scotland during the World War I. And when he got out of that, and he came from a family of some means, but when he came out, he said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And he became a pacifist. And he decided that he would work for a world of nonviolence during the rise of what was becoming the Second World War. And he wanted to organize a community that was based on a different way of relating to one another. And he brought together clergymen, seminarians, he brought together craftspeople and laymen, and he rebuilt a project. Because what he said was, we must rise up. We must put our faith, our hope into action. We must create community and not say that, that division has the last word. We must speak a different language. We must declare life in the midst of death and community in the midst of rising individualism. And he talked about these shared visions as demanding common tasks. So John Oliver Nelson heard of his work in Scotland and came back here. And he also became a pacifist in the beginning and the rise of the Second World War. So Kirkridge was founded in 1942. Both of them believe that their faith called them into an act of hope. And this is the hope that stares the heartache of pain, of doubt, uncertainty, of violence, of greed, of the chaos of racial violence and the prejudice in our country and says, no, absolutely no. There is another way to live in the world. The changes that we work in the world matter. And some of those changes are very small. But what is it that we are each throwing into this pebble in this pond, and what ripples of the practices of hope that we have in our daily lives? What do they make in the world? So Amy went on to quote a woman named Joanna Macy. And Joanna Macy and Chris Johnson wrote a recent book called Act of Hope. So I've got to tell you a Joanna Macy story. So just hold this because this is too good. So I was up at Cape Cod with some friends. We were going to listen to a woman named Margaret Wheatley. And we had the opportunity to meet Joanna Macy. And Joanna took my hand. I just have to share this with y'all. Joanna takes my hand and she looks at me and she says, Jean, how is Kirkridge? Joanna's 92 right now, something like that. I almost fell off my chair. I mean, she literally just took my hand. How is Kirkridge? And then she proceeded to tell me, I love this story. Kirkridge is where I left Christianity. She said, I had my last fight with the fathers of the church up in Nelson Lodge in a bunk bed. And she has gone on to be this wonderful Buddhist teacher, this very influential spiritual leader. So that is Joanna Macy. If you don't know Joanna Macy, look her up. She does amazing work to create a more peaceful, loving, just, and healthy planet. So Joanna Macy. So here's what she says, well into her 90s with Chris Johnson. Active hope is a readiness to discover the strengths in ourselves and in others. A readiness to discover the reasons for hope and the occasions for love. A readiness to discover the size and strengths of our hearts, our quickness of mind, our steadiness of purpose, our own authority. Our love for life, the liveliness of our curiosity, unsuspected deep well of patience and diligence, the keenness of our senses and our capacity to lead. It's such a great quote. I'll read it again. Active hope is a readiness to discover the strengths in ourselves and in others. A readiness to discover the reasons for hope and the occasions for love. A readiness to discover the size and strength of our own hearts, our quickness of mind, our steadiness of purpose, and our own authority. Our love of life and the liveliness of our curiosity, the unsuspected deep well of patience and diligence, the keenness of our senses and our capacity to lead. That's active hope. That's why hope is in our mission statement. It's an active hope. It can't be discovered in an armchair. It can't be discovered while sitting back in a pew. It is not without risk. Active hope is risky business because it's willing to name the problems, the griefs, the heartaches, and see beyond glimmering pinpricks of light. And as Amy said, glimmering pinpricks of light that are God's abiding presence. It is a knowing that there is something beyond ourselves or an inner wisdom that is drawn to life, to love, to wholeness, more than to death, division, and fear. That is active hope. So that is my spiel on that. And Vita, tessellator of hope. I want to ask you a question, which is when you said yes to become the tessellator of hope, what allowed you to say yes? What was the inner voice you heard to say yes? And how does this work of hope speak to you, and what do you envision?
Thanks, Jean. And let me just add my welcome to everybody and my gratitude to you for inviting me to be a guest here. I'm really delighted to be here. So I want to say two things. First of all, I was a department chair for many years. And so becoming a department chair at Kirkridge is very different in my mind than being a department chair at an academic institution. And so that's one reason, just to kind of explore how can this be done differently? How can we not just bring together, but work with a group of people who are offering their gifts and skills to the world in a different way, in a way that's appropriate to Kirkridge. So that was one thing. But the other thing I want to say is a little bit longer answer, and it's about how I feel about hope. And it's related to my response in the chat that, if we look at the world, it looks like, as some of us have a saying that I've heard for many years, looks like we're going to hell in a handbasket. And quickly, I might add. But what I believe spiritually is that things are not always as they seem. And even though it looks this way, and even though there are a lot of horrible, ugly, mean-spirited, dangerous, thoughtless, and I would add the word just plain old stupid things happening in the world today that really threaten all of us, including those who are acting in these ways that are not the best. All of this it's part of this this moment in history where we are, where we're moving into a new world. I really believe we're moving into a world of peace and love, a world that really works for all people. But and as someone said, I can't remember who said this, part of what's so ugly about what we're seeing now is just that things are being revealed. Like, I think so much of the stuff that we're seeing has been going on forever, but now it's coming to the surface, is being revealed, which means that it can be healed. As long as it stays under the surface, it can't be healed. So it feels horrible and it looks horrible, but it's like we got to see it in order to deal with it, so that then we can move on and make some different decisions about how we live in the world. And on the one hand, the problems that we're facing are so incredibly complex and massive that it's easy to feel hopeless, to feel like, well, there's nothing that can be done because look at what can I, an individual person, do? On the other hand, I also believe that we each agreed to be here at this time because we knew we had something to offer, and that no matter how small or tiny we feel that our gift is to offer, it's important and it's needed. And if we all offer our gifts, the thing that we feel called to offer, if we all make those offerings together over time, I'm not saying it'll happen tomorrow, but over time, we really will be able to move into this new world that we want. Because I think most people want to live in a world in which they have healthy food, and they've got safe housing, and they have adequate education, and they have opportunities to work in meaningful ways. And I think those are aspects of human nature that we all share, no matter what culture or race or gender or whatever we are. But I think that we've become, so many of us in the world have kind of accepted kind of what I would call a consciousness of lack, where we feel like, no, only some people can give what they really want, and others of us have to suffer. And so, but that's not true. And again, back to my point, is that if we really honor what we're called from within to do, and we do it to the best of our ability, that will make a difference, and that will be enough. We can't do more than that. And so to me, it's kind of like, I feel like I have to have hope. Otherwise, I can't really go on. And this life is precious, and our planet is precious, and we are each precious. So my only option is to have hope, but I don't feel like it's faulty. I feel like that if we all do our part, if I do my part, and we all do our part in looking within and discovering and feeling what it is that we're called to do, if I really become aware of what my true gifts are, and I act on those gifts, I act on that knowing by offering those gifts, that will be enough when combined with so many other people doing the same thing. So that's why I said yes.
Vita, I thank you for saying yes. And, we talked a little bit before this, and, I think of the 33 years that you were at Spelman and all the goodness and hope that you put into the world. And when I went back through the Gathered at the Table book, I was interested to see what topics did we put under the heading of hope. And the biggest topic that we put under there, which I want to talk about first with you, is we put the arts. We put dance and music and written word and poetry. So would you talk a little bit about your work and how hope and how, the intersection that you brought between the arts and spirituality and contemplation, and how does that all fold into this topic of hope?
Great question. Thank you. Thank you, Jean. First of all, I would say that it is my belief that that the arts are a way of communicating with the divine. I mean, I believe that that the divine exists in all of us, and that, so I'm talking about like the creator with the capital C, and we are, and when we are all creating, we're creating because it's a relationship with the big creator. And so I've always, when I was a dancer, when I was a choreographer, those are my art forms, I always felt that I was doing what I did, not just to, just to put on a show, not just to demonstrate how high I could kick my leg or how many turns I could do, but it was really about communicating some kind of deeper message that I felt was coming to me from, well, at the time when I was, especially earlier on in my career, I didn't have this awareness. I had an awareness that, one started choreographing, and then after a while, the dance kind of choreographed itself. Like the dance would tell me what needed to happen. Now I know that dance was like the big creator, or the creator within me giving me those messages. And so I feel like the arts are really important for hope, because one, as I said, they're coming from this inner place, but also one of the things that the arts do is that they help us to see the world in different ways. They present a different viewpoint, a different perspective, a different idea about something. And I think when we're open to receiving those new ideas, that can help us, first of all, imagine a new world. And second of all, help us think, maybe the way I thought about this particular thing, maybe I was a little off, or maybe that was a correct way of thinking of it about it in the past, but as we move forward, maybe there's another way to think about it that will actually be better for me and for everybody else and for the world. So I think the arts help us to imagine a new world. They help us to see new possibilities. I think that that artists are conduits, as I said, to the divine, and that they help us connect with the divine within ourselves. I mean, listening to a piece of beautiful music, I mean, I feel like there's something that happens within me that just my heart expands, or sometimes looking at a beautiful painting, or some dance that's really beautiful, or moving myself. There is some kind of transformative thing that happens within humans through the arts that I think is really, really important. And again, by helping us to see things in different ways and imagine brighter futures with more possibilities, like they really are instruments of hope. So I think that's a perfect placement for that.
Oh, thank you, Rita, so much. I gotta admit, I hadn't remembered what we put in that section on hope. And the arts really leads the day with a wonderful article by our own Marcia Gleckler, who is over here on my screen, about all the history of the arts. And not only the history of the arts around hope and inspiration, but actually the courage that the arts actually gave to people with music and gospel. And Marcia writes about women singing in the rotunda of the Capitol building, calling for peace. That's important because that is what unites us together. The other two things that are in there, and I actually have this little button, and it's going to come up backwards, right? It's called In Hope. But this is from Janice Fialka Feldman, who was a leader really in the disability movement. She has a son named Micah who sits on our board. That's the other group that we put in here, a conversation about a group that we have at Kirkridge called TIP, Together It's Possible. TIP the system, and TIP, Together It's Possible. And that is in this section because it's a hope and a vision of a world that is inclusive for people who live with intellectual and physical disabilities, which is one of the groups we often leave out in our world. And the other thing we don't talk about in our world, which is the third and final thing in that book, is men who struggled with sexual abuse. And that group has met at Kirkridge for over 36 years, I think, 36 years. And I just thought those three things are what we highlight in our section of hope. What does it mean to be a people of hope? So I think what we'd like to do is open it up for conversation. We're not too many. We'll go as long as the conversation seems to lead. And I don't know, Vita, if you have a question to start, or do you want me to start?
Well, actually, I have a question. And maybe folks can put this in the chat, or maybe put it in the chat to begin. And my question is, what's your relationship with hope? So maybe I'll put that in. What's my relationship to hope? And wherever you want to go with that, feel free to go with it. And yeah. And maybe folks can just, even if you just want to jot a couple thoughts down in the chat, feel free to do that. Or if you want to just go ahead and offer it, just speak it, that's welcome as well. Mm-hmm. And maybe what I can do is ask folks to elaborate in a little bit. Beautiful. Mm-hmm.
So, Gene and Vita, this is Michael Adie from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I put the statement, I live into hope. And for me, hope is that ground of being. It's what I rely on. It inspires my heart. It calls me to work for justice. And Vita, I'm with you. It's not about naivete. I am not naive about the world and the evil in the world right now, and the suffering in Ukraine and other places around the world. And yet I have hope which sustains. And I try to take the long view, which helps me hold on to hope and to live into hope. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I just love the way you said it, that it's not naivete, but without hope, we don't have the energy or the capacity to continue doing the work that needs to be done in order to make the changes that we know need to be made. Yeah, thank you. Sally, I loved yours, and I haven't read anybody's after yours. Yeah, I sleep with her every night and wake up with her every morning. Beautiful. A thing, Chloe says, hope is a thing with feathers. Can you say more about that? Do you mind if I just invite you to say something?
Not at all. I'd be happy to. I think that's the opening line of an Emily Dickinson poem. And I'll be totally honest, that's the only part of the poem that sticks in my head word for word. But to me, I think it speaks to this idea that hope is something that is powerful and inspiring, but it's also something that for me needs to be cared for and needs to be stewarded and nurtured and protected in many ways. I cannot just have this one-way reliance on hope to return. If I want to have a relationship with it, I need to nurture it in the same way that I expect it to drive me.
Beautiful, beautiful. And can I ask a follow-up?
Absolutely.
How do you nurture hope?
I think it's by finding folks who also feel hopeful, and finding beauty in the world that is worth inspiring hope. A lot of my hope is to continue to foster beauty, to see that there is something that is naturally out there that just needs to be encouraged, as opposed to something that needs to be entirely self-created. That feels a lot less daunting.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
If I could just piggyback on Chloe, it's interesting, Chloe, you put that line in, because I was thinking sometimes even in my worst, most hopeless moments, it's the birds outside our windows that I watch that somehow keep me grounded in that hope. And it's an Emily Dickinson poem. Many of hers were so short. And I may have one word of this wrong, but I think how it goes is, hope is the thing with feathers that flutters in the soul and sings the song without the words and never stops at all.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful.
Yeah, thanks, Gail.
Thank you.
So I'm reading additional ones. Tony, I appreciate yours, evolving, complicated, and becoming more gentle. Can I ask you to say more about that? It's an invitation. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's complicated. It's changed over time. I think traveling the edge between, I think there were decades when I think I was more attracted to optimism, which is not the same as hope. The other piece of the complication is that just given my own internal makeup, I can tend towards kind of a perfectionism and a kind of a judgmental self relationship. And so when I do experience hope, often it would get filtered through that and turn into turn more towards a kind of a shoulding about even that which is manifesting as hope, as opposed to experiencing it more as a manifestation of love and self-love and the unfolding and manifesting of love instead of, and the learning and listening for what that's inviting, as opposed to a kind of a finger wagging quality to it. That making sense?
Total sense. Beautifully said.
Meant by gentling.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. It is easy to, yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna say the same thing you said, that it's easy for it to either get into optimism, or I like the way you said, a kind of shoulding, and which is based in judgmentalism. And I really appreciate what you said about it really needing to come from love and from self-love. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. So I'm just reading through, but if anybody wants to just speak.
I'd like to say something about that. I'm not big on typing. Sometimes I spend a lot of time typing. It takes me a long time and I make mistakes so you can't read it very well. I think it's important, for me, it's very much important to distinguish hope and active hope, as Jean mentioned that. I'm quite familiar with Joanna Macy's work, and she works with someone who was my psychosynthesis mentor for a couple of years, and I know her quite well. And so I think that hope is, we need to go into what's the world is with eyes wide open. And I think sometimes we get into this Pollyanna, oh, it'll all kind of work out. And I think that's not what hope is. There's always hope. There's always, but it's behind that is the intention. What are we hoping for? And what are we willing to do to facilitate that end that we're wanting or desiring or intending? I think that's where the active side comes in, and it is extremely important. I think the world today, as we look, if we look with eyes wide open, we can't, which is very difficult. I mean, look at I'm in Europe, so look at what's happening in Europe right now. It's over a month, very close by, of people, totally innocent victims being bombed for no reasons. And despite an entire world of countries that don't believe in it, we seem unable to stop what's happening. And the people that are experiencing this are having to experience it, because in many cases they can't even get out now. If you look at the people in Ukraine and various places, they can't leave. There's no way to get out. In one place, they tried to get to the station and it was bombed. But they haven't lost hope. I think that's the other thing that is just so inspiring. And the other thing I wanted to mention, that is the notion of community, which other people have mentioned. I think Chloe said something about that, and other people have written about that. That we need the support of other people to keep the hope burning, if you will, to keep that flicker alight. And it's very, very difficult to do it alone. The sense of community and a feeling that there are other people that we can either talk to or rely on or ask for help or hold hands with is so important, that it can't be done alone.
Mhm.
And just the last thing is about the notion of the arts, and there it's been talked about and shown in various wisdom traditions and the Gurdjieff work, and we have three centers of knowing, of wisdom as individuals. We have an intellectual center that in the West we just have like overused, to no end. We train people to analyze and reason and think things out, but we can't know ourselves that way. We can't analyze and work with concepts and really know who we are. We cannot know ourselves as people of hope and compassion and care and love and through our intellectual system. We have other systems, though, that we've forgotten about. And one of those is what we might call an embodied body knowledge, or a moving center, Gurdjieff called it. And that is very much facilitated by things like dance and singing and choral work, which is like a yoga if you think about it, because when you sing, you're always singing on your out breath. So you have to inhale and then exhale, excuse me. And even in French, the word is actually bring in spirit, let spirit go. You inspire, you expire. So that we become connected to something else when we work with ways that in our body, we come back into our bodies. And that's something that we've forgotten how to do. And I think that through the arts, we can help people to get back in touch with that, because then they come into tune with their own knowing. And then then the last center, so there's the intellectual center, there's this moving center, or the body center, if you want to call it that. And then the last is that emotional center. And the emotional center is not just getting emotional about things, it's the heart center. It's really related to that ability to resonate with someone else, to really feel. That's what the compassion's all about. When you can feel. But radical compassion is not just feeling it, it's wanting to help somebody that's suffering. It's wanting to get out there and do things. And that's, again, where we need the support of our community, because it's scary as hell, to get out and do something. I'm so inspired by these poor people that are in Mariupol now, the last group in a I can't remember what building they're in, but there are only like 100 of them left, and they are going to die, they say. We're not going to give up. It's all gone. The whole area is gone to the Russians, but they will not give up. They say, we're going to hang on, and they're making life really, really difficult for the Russian invaders there. But I mean, talk about hope. People that have that kind of courage and that kind of, at some point, we've got nothing to lose, and they're willing to put their lives down. I mean, that's hope.
Yeah.
But I think that we really have to look at, there's faith related to hope that helps us be hopeful, I guess. And what do we have our faith in? I think all of these are interlocking pieces, and we can't do it alone.
Wow. Thank you, Abigail. Beautifully said. A lot of wisdom that you just shared. Thank you. Someone else, as I'm reading, but
I would love to share a little. What first came to me was, it lives in my heart. And I think this was mentioned, it also correlates with like the truth, the beauty, the goodness that you see, which was brought up, the beauty. And when I first met Hope was when I was pregnant with my child. And, the children are kind of the future. And that's where I see it, when these children are able to be in nature and be unhindered. And the educational method that we use really, goes with the arts, and they go with how can we remove the hindrances from the child so they can really unfold who they really are and to be open to what they're here to bring to the world. And I heard a story this weekend, which I felt like I should share. I was with this man who lived up near Kirkridge. He was about 90 and he was sharing his stories. And he was talking about when he was younger, you know, they had the different communities. They had the Polish community, the Italian community, and the Irish community, and they didn't interrelate. You know, they had their sections and their clubs, and you didn't kind of cross into those. But he said that when the YMCA opened up, all the kids went there and then they became good friends. And once that happened, you know, the kids were allowed to go and learn from each of the different communities. He learned how to cook Italian food and he brought that into his Polish home. And, you know, it was just that reinforcement that, yes, like these communities of families and children, you know, that really helps bring it together and can go past these things that maybe seem like divisions. And I just love the work that you guys are doing. The arts are so important, and the tip that together, and I'm sorry, I forget what the name of that was, program is so amazing, because to have those children together and to meet each other and become friends and not have that boundaries is just so important. So for me, hope is really in those families and in those children and nature. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Sheena. Thank you for that. I think it's together it's possible, right, Jean?
Together it's possible. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And sorry, was someone else going to speak? I was going to say, I love your talking about community, and because to me it's a sense of connection, and which is hopeful. I mean, we really are all connected, even though we don't necessarily, a lot of us don't feel that way.
Vita, that's just a wonderful turn. This is great. And I went through the list and I just picked up these phrases, and I wonder if we could turn the conversation to communities of hope, companions to hope, a community of hope, connecting, wholeness. I think it's in community. Look at the world with community. What is it? What is it about community? I would love to hear people's responses to that. And you started us down that road. So because I think it's like we hold each other together. We're tethered together when we're struggling. So I'd love to turn the conversation as, what about community that relates to hope? And how does that then maybe relate to maybe the future vision of what you're going to do as the chair of hope for us at Kirkridge?
Me, you're asking me, or you're asking everyone? Okay, I'll wait. I'll see if other folks want to speak, and then I'll talk about it.
Hi, this is Marcia Gleckler, and I wanted to talk about the legacy of hope that is part of Kirkridge. I was on another Zoom before I got onto this Zoom with my Wednesday writers group that meets every week. And we've met throughout the pandemic. And later I had a little conversation with one of the women who lives in New Zealand. And it was 3:30 a.m. on Thursday, when we were talking. So, she remembers going to Kirkridge when she was living in the US. She was introduced to Kirkridge, and she joined the company in 1987. And so she knew John Oliver Nelson, and she's maybe 20 years younger than I am. I'm 89. And so she could talk about the company and having personal experiences with John Oliver Nelson. And she loves Kirkridge and remembers all of that and feels a part of it. So that's part of the legacy that we have going for us. And, and I told her, well, I can't compete with that because I only got started in 1991 or 92. So I've been going ever since, but, I couldn't quite brag that I was a member of the company or that I personally met John Oliver Nelson. So, just that connection with other people who have made hope part of their identity, because they got so much of that at Kirkridge.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Marcia. Thank you. How amazing.
Well, it's Cap Whitney, and I'm speaking to you from Dublin, Ohio, a burb of Columbus. I've been coming to Kirkridge for a long time, but as soon as Jean speaks of community, I can't help but speak up to that, of what community means to me with Kirkridge. And and there are a few people on here that we know each other from Kirkridge, and we've been together there. And when I leave there long ago, Cindy Harney, who was the wife of a former director, told me one time, when you leave Kirkridge, take it with you, because at the time I lived in New Jersey, and I would come there fairly often. But the point being that I came there, and quite frankly, I was a mess. This has been 35 years ago. But I left with hope, and I've always left with hope of the future. But the community of Kirkridge is in my heart every time. And some of you have heard this before, probably ad nauseum, but every night when I go to sleep, I picture that view out the window or off a bench out into the Delaware Water Gap and those hills and mountains over in New Jersey, but it's the people that I have connected with and that I have made, which I've learned is a faith connection, a belief connection. And last Saturday night, my church hosted a connection, or a connection with Ukraine. It was a fundraiser, and it was a musical thing. And I've had the good fortune of being in some of the greatest art museums in the world, and it's like, yeah, okay, but the music, it always touches my heart. And I mean, there are pieces of music that give me hope, even though I see I watch the news every day. But one of the most examples of hope is Zelensky, when he comes on and as his country is being torn out from under him, and he's pleading for help from us, and he's not getting what he really needs, and yet he still has such hope, and those people that are doing that. And I saw these people, and because this event that we hosted was hosted by a Ukrainian church, and these people, some of them have relatives there now, but there were also children, and singing in their native language, their music, and just all of that, that all is community. And I feel a part, as I look at these pictures, some of you I've met personally, some of you I've never seen before, but I feel we're all in community together. There's a connection there, because we're on this journey to reach out to one another, and to support one another, to pray for one another, and to sometimes give money, or give support, or give somebody a ride, or just say, I hear you. I have found that I associate with people like that. And that's community. It's community within the condo building I live in. It's community within this city, but it's also community around the globe. I know we have at least more than one person out of the country on this conversation right now. And those are all tied together. And but I see the horrors that are going on in Ukraine, those people of Ukraine, what magnificent hope they have. And this event that I watched, and I didn't have a whole lot to do. I did a little bit, but very little. But they raised $20,000, and every penny of that is going to go to Ukraine. And part of it is to have drivers at the Ukrainian-Polish border drive into Ukraine and deliver the goods. And they've lost 3 drivers already. And I mean, talk about stepping up, and talking about having hope and given for all. And I'm deeply touched by all of that. And, you know, I'm an old man, but it's still, I have a lot of hope. And thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Beautiful, beautiful thoughts. Anyone else like to speak about hope and community? Great, Lori.
When Jean mentioned community of hope, community of active hope was still on my mind from before. The things that immediately popped to mind were it's a space where we're fed. Well, first of all, it's a space for all. It's a space where we're fed. It's a space where we share, where we grow, where we learn. It's intergenerational, it's multi-demographic, it's etc. Welcoming, radically welcoming.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Lori. Someone else.
Sure. It was touched on earlier about being in community with other people that have hope. And I do feel that very strongly. I'm called to do one thing in one way, and I have hope in that. But to then meet with others that have that hope and that hope in action, I love that phrase, and they're able to bring it into other realms. And then we're able to be in community where we can see all these other realms and where hope is in action. And it's a beautiful thing, and a beautiful thing to share. And I actually was listening to some of the stories on one of your YouTube channels, and I was able to share it with my son because he was feeling very distraught by the world. And I was able to share those personal stories of how these other community members are bringing that into their community and into the world. And it is a beautiful thing. So
That's good.
Thank you, Sheena. Thanks. So were you going to say something, Michael? Looked like you had unmuted yourself a minute ago.
You have such a keen eye. Thanks, Vita. So when you and Jean have invited us to think about hope in a communal way or as a community of hope, I heard an echo from the late wonderful Black scholar and faith leader from Harvard, Dr. Peter Gomes. And he said in his book, The Good Book, there's no such thing as a private Christian. We are Christians in community. And I've never forgotten that. And while my background of hope and faith and love comes from a Christian context, I'm keenly aware the divine is not restricted to Christianity, thank God. But I thought about Peter Gomes and that call. And when I struggled with the church as a gay man coming out and trying to find my way, I felt like the church was either silent or hostile. And so I stepped away. And I spent a lot of time in nature. I would go on hikes and I thought, well, nature is my cathedral. Nature is my church. But then I was invited back in to that worshiping community, and the one that was safe for me in Cincinnati. And that's when I thought, yes, Peter Gomes, you are correct. And whatever the divine or the sacred or the holy is for people, we are not alone. And I'm really grateful for Peter Gomes and want to bring him in this conversation. And Vita, you probably worked with him at some point or knew him certainly, but what an inspiration. And that's what I thought about, and I can do a lot on my own. I'm a fiercely independent person, but I am better in community. And what that requires of me is some vulnerability to say that I need others, that I need community, that I am stronger in community, that I can accomplish the work of faith and justice with others, and not just do it alone. So thank you for that conversation about community. You know, those of us as individuals within a larger space, a larger community.
Beautiful. Thanks for that, Michael. I love that quote. There's no such thing as a private Christian. This makes so much sense. I hadn't heard that before. Thank you for sharing that. And I have two thoughts that come. One is that what you were just saying makes me think of a jazz group. So, you know, if you know a jazz quartet or whatever the group is, like the individuals are playing their solos and they're shining as individuals, but their shining as individuals is all in service of the shining of the group. And so the group supports the individuals and the individuals support the group. So I love that, how that works. The other thought that came to me was something that some Kirkridge faculty members shared in a retreat on quantum physics a while back. And they shared this beautiful segment of a video, of a conversation, I think it was the interview with this physicist, Lothar Schaefer, who was talking about the difference between Newtonian physics, which is like, that's the physics we think about, and quantum physics. And he says Newtonian physics it sees the world in a mechanistic way. Everything is individual, everything is disconnected, and if there's a problem, you repair one piece of it, just like some doctors think about the human body. Whereas in quantum physics, everything is connected, and we're instead of talking about individual pieces, we're talking about systems or ecosystems. And so if you want to treat, if there's something wrong with the human body, for example, you don't just treat that one thing, you have to treat the whole body. And he also said something about, from a Newtonian perspective, war makes sense, that if there's one individual thing that's wrong, then you bomb it. Whereas from a quantum physics perspective, war makes no sense at all because everything is connected. So hurting one country or one group of people is really hurting others as well. So anyway, so Sally or Jean, do you want to add anything to that? Because I know you were in that retreat as well.
I just add my gratitude that you said it so beautifully. I just, yes, understanding our connectedness has just changed my worldview. And I'm so grateful.
Thanks. Thank you.
Vita, I know that you do meditation, and I know that you meditate with others. And like when we walk a labyrinth, we might walk with others. When we pray with others. And so Michael, when you were talking, I actually just kind of found myself like moving towards sort of silence and meditation and contemplation. And we don't even want to do that alone. And we could, but we can't. So, Vita, I'd love for you to talk about that. Why are you called in community to do meditation and breathing? And what is it that happens that doesn't happen alone? And even though when you're alone, you're still connected, right? It's like,
yeah. Wow, that's such an interesting thing to think about, because of course I do meditate alone because sometimes I'm by myself. And in my meditation, I feel a sense of connection with the divine within me. And my belief system is that no matter what you call it, it's the same thing, no matter what wisdom or faith tradition you practice or none, even if you're just, you're focusing on nature or life or something, it's all the same thing. And so that even if I'm meditating by myself, that thing that I'm connected to is also in a way connecting me to everybody else, because it's the same thing that's in everybody else. There's something great, however, and I want to say, and I love meditating by myself, because meditation is great. And I love meditating in a group, because I don't know why it's different or exactly how it's different, but there's something that's powerful about that group energy that just happens when people are meditating together, just as if they're dancing together or singing together or building a house together or whatever they're doing. That I think maybe it's just about being more aware of that connection with other human beings, or not even just human beings, other beings on the planet, that happens in those group settings, that just makes that sense of connection more powerful. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's there always, but it's important to have the awareness of it at least some of the time. I think that just makes a difference. It's just like, I forget, somebody who talked about holding hands and what a difference that makes. It's just not feeling alone gives me more courage to do what I know is the right thing for me to do. Yeah, that's what comes to mind. Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool.
I would love to chime in here because I've had a phrase in my head that I haven't been able to get out for the past 10 minutes. From when you were talking about physics briefly, even it begged this idea in my head that we consider, if we're talking about something and we're all discussing one thing, it requires an observation, it requires a perspective, and oftentimes a shared perspective. And I've come across this phrase as it pertains to like love and joy and humor. And maybe this is also true of hope, but that it is only real when it's shared. And I think that that's really important here.
Beautiful.
It feels important to lift up to that hope is not, it is in the future, but it's also in the past. And when we can't find it in our brokenness or in our hard winters or on our dark days, it is the memory of hope and memory of hope and community that sustains us.
Exquisite, Diane. Yeah, that's just lovely. That's powerful, because sometimes that's all we have is the memory of it. But I love you're saying that, because that's a reminder that that's enough. If that's all we have in that moment, hold on to it. Yeah. Beautiful. Any other thoughts about community?
This is really something, Jean, that I've learned from you. So I'm going to ask you to chime in because I can't say it as well as you do. But I love words, and I know that community has the same root as the word common. And I know that Kirkridge is unique in that no one owns it, that it belongs to the common. And that's part of what gives me hope. Jean, just say another word about the common, because I just think that's so important.
Thanks, Sally. So years ago, I was talking to a pretty well-known fundraiser who specialized in working with small nonprofits, little grassroots things. And I said, well, what is the biggest challenge we're going to face in the next decade? And her answer just blew my socks off. And her answer was the loss of common space, common libraries, common parks, common access to the beaches, common understandings of healthcare, common places where we have conversation. They used to, in New England especially, they would have conversation in these common spaces. And I've held that for a long time. And then it dawned on me one day when a friend of mine was visiting, and he said to me, "So, Jean, when this all shuts down," he says, "who's going to get it?"
Hmm.
And I said, "No one. It's not owned by anybody." He said, "No, really, really. What university, what church, who's going to get this land?" I said, "It's not controlled by anyone. We all own it." He said, "No, that can't be true." I said, "It is." And it dawned on me in that moment, in that interaction, how unique Kirkridge is. It is not owned by any denomination. It's not owned by any university. It's not controlled by any larger nonprofit. It sits like this little boat on a very big sea. And it floats around, and it is filled with people of hope who blow on the sails and row together and say, we can create a different world here. And it is owned totally in common. And sometimes it worries me because it's a little vulnerable. Like if you get the wrong people on the board, they're going to sell it to developers or something and take the money. But so far that hasn't happened. So it sits in the world as it is. And I really truly believe that every decade has brought people of hope to the mountain and continues to do so. So thank you, Sally, for that question. Veta, closing words, my dear.
First of all, I just want to offer my gratitude for everybody being here and for this lovely conversation. I wrote down some great gems that you all have shared, and I really appreciate that. And I just want to say it does my heart good. My heart is just full and open and happy because we're even talking about hope, which is so great. I mean, it's so needed. And I just want to give a shout out to Sally. I meant to say this earlier, who on her Facebook page for, I don't know, probably going on 2 years now or more, all of her posts are about hope, which is so beautiful. So I just offer my gratitude, and I'm thankful to be part of this community, part of this conversation, and among the humans on the planet who are living with hope. Thanks.
Well, Veta, I know you're going to close us out with a poem, but before you do that, I want to just read one quote, because there is, in this quantum physics mindset, right, there are no accidents, right? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what Bob Raines used to read, and this is one of my favorite quotes about Kirkridge, and he would read this at the beginning of every retreat, and I'm going to read the very last part. He said, "If you brought some of your demons with you, if you brought your despair, if you brought your grief, if you brought your depression, your darkness, your brokenness with you, remember that angels are also with you too. Your hope, your light, your community, the possibility. The mountain welcomes you. This ancient rock has been here for 300 million years. Whatever sin or sorrow, grief or anger you have brought, the mountain is not appalled." I love that. It's like we can stand on something 300 million years old and say, it is safe here. This blink that we're living in is a blink. And yet this rock is safe. It's seen and heard it all. It is one of the arms of God where it's safe to lean a while. So I thank you all for coming. And Veta, I am just delighted you said yes. And please close us with the poem.
All right. Thank you, Jean. That was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So we'd like to close with this poem by Rosemary Watola Tromer. It's titled Hope. And it's not too long, so I'm going to read it and take a breath and then read it again. She says, hope has holes in its pockets. It leaves little crumb trails so that we, when anxious, can follow it. Here's its secret. It doesn't know the destination. It only knows that all roads begin with one foot in front of the other. Hope has holes in its pockets. It leaves little crumb trails so that we, when anxious, can follow it. Hope's secret. It doesn't know the destination. It only knows that all roads begin with one foot in front of the other. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Veta, for your leadership and entering into this space. Thank you all for coming. My next gathered at the table conversation, which you're all welcome to return to, is, let me just look, it's April. It must be the 27th.
27th, correct.
Yep. And I'm going to be in conversation. We're going to not quite do our little things in order. It is going to be on service. Compassion, Hope, Justice, Service with Estrus Tucker. So I will welcome you back. Bring your lunch, bring something to drink, bring your coffee, and we'll see you then. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.